This is an update about the hate crime that left 5 people dead in Colorado. Saturday night, a 22-year-old man entered an LGBTQ nightclub in Colorado Springs. He wore body armor and immediately started firing from a long rifle. But within moments, someone grabbed a handgun from the attacker and took him to the ground. And we now know the identity of the hero that stopped this domestic terrorist. This is Army veteran Richard Fierro. He was at Club Q watching a drag show with his wife and daughter that night. When the gunman entered, Richard hit the ground at first, but then he saw the attacker moving towards a patio where dozens of people had fled to. Richard sprinted across the room and used a handle on the man's body armor to pull him down. The rifle flew out of the attacker's hands, and that's when Richard saw another gun. Richard said, quote, "I grabbed the gun out of his hand and just started hitting him in the head over and over." Richard then yelled for help, and that's when a drag dancer came over and stomped on the gunman with her high heels. Police arrived within minutes, but by that point Richard thought he had killed the attacker. And unfortunately, Richard was tackled and kept handcuffed in a squad car for over an hour. 5 people were killed and 17 others were injured. Police initially said it was over 24, but that number has been lowered to 17. 13 of them remain in the hospital, and the gunman remains in the hospital as well. The 22-year-old faces 5 counts of murder and 5 counts of a hate crime, and those charges could change. Richard and his wife actually own a brewery, so please go support their business. You can also buy some things online if you're not local. And this is the official donation site for victims of the Club Q shooting, so please watch out for fakes.
So Kobe Bryant's daughter is dealing with a really terrifying stalker situation. They say not only is she scared, but even the LAPD. The stalker has a pretty serious criminal history involving guns and has been doing everything he can to find her. She beelined to the courthouse on Monday to get a restraining order against the 32-year-old Dwayne Kemp. He's been stalking her for about 2 years. He has delusions that they have a romantic relationship. He's been convicted of at least 4 crimes, including one involving firearms. He sent her a DM with an image of Kobe and wrote, "I'm thankful for him birthing you, and hopefully we can birth him." The LAPD is involved in the case and clearly wants a restraining order placed.
This mysterious case absolutely does not sit right with me. Someone knows something and has not come forward. On the 12th of July 2015, 18-year-old Tiffany and her parents attended a graduation party in New Jersey. At around 9 p.m, one of Tiffany's friends spoke to her parents and claimed that they were really annoyed because Tiffany had used their debit card without permission. Tiffany initially denied this to her friend, but then did admit this to her mum Diane a little bit later. At this point, they were all outside Tiffany's house, and Diane went inside to find her husband. When she returned outside of the house, Tiffany had vanished. Now, they were able to see Tiffany on the deer cameras that they had outside the house. She appears to be walking down the driveway in her normal clothing and white headband. When they tried to find Tiffany, they actually made a terrifying discovery. Her phone was lying on the floor at the bottom of the driveway. Immediately, they knew something was wrong, as Tiffany never had her phone out of her sight. At 11:30 p.m, her family called the police. Little did they know, 27 minutes earlier, Tiffany had been hit by a train. Frustratingly, pretty much straight away, police presumed this death to be a self-unaliving. However, that just didn't seem to fit with the evidence presented. All of Tiffany's family and friends said how much of an upbeat person she was and that she was really happy at the time. She was making plans for the future, and the autopsy also showed that she had a clean toxicology report. Now, in the deer cam footage, she was fully clothed, but when she was found, she was just in her underwear with no shoes on. Upsettingly, 2 weeks after her death, Tiffany's mum actually found her missing trainers and headband more than a mile away from the tracks. Could someone have murdered Tiffany and then dumped her body on the train tracks to make it look like she did this herself? Tiffany's parents certainly think so. They definitely suspect some foul play was involved. This man reenacted the murder of his victim in front of her parents, but they didn't know that he was the killer. October the 4th, 2004, Joe O'Reilly got a call at work to say that his wife hadn't picked up their son from nursery. Joe began to contact his wife, but could only get through to her answer phone. He left several answer phone messages to her, each getting more and more desperate in tone. Rachel's mum Rose was alerted by Joe, and she quickly sped off in her car to the pair's home. When she got there, she was met by an absolutely horrific scene. Rachel's body was face down on the floor and she'd been hit around 8 times over the head with a blunt instrument. Initially, police thought that this was a burglary gone wrong. There was some overturned furniture which aligned with this theory, but only a jewellery box had been taken. Rachel's family soon began getting suspicious of husband Joe. When he was met with his wife's body for the first time, he apparently said, "Oh Rachel, what have you done?" Not only did this arouse suspicion, but the crime looked like a crime of passion. It was a very up-close and personal vicious attack. Joe seemed very keen to be in the limelight and did many television interviews. He even appeared with Rachel's mum on the Late Late Show, which was the most watched show in Ireland at the time. Bizarrely, Joe rejected the offer of a free forensic cleanup team to go to his house. He seemed to want to clean up his wife's blood himself. He also really disturbingly invited Rachel's family over to see the crime scene. Then, to the shock of the family members, he started to reenact what he said that he thought the murder might have looked like. Police then examined Joe's phone and found hundreds of messages to a female colleague. After initially denying having an affair, he then admitted to it but said that it was over. The woman in question, though, denied that it was over. Officers arrested Joe on the 17th of November but did have to release him after questioning. 6 months later, due to new information, police decided to exhume Rachel's body from the coffin that she was buried in. They'd been told that Joe had put a sealed note in her coffin and they were really interested in what it said. They found that the note said, "Rachel, forgive me." Police also discovered that in messages to one of his family members, Joe actually called Rachel a lazy cunt. Eventually, due to tracking Joe's phone and locating where he was minute by minute on the day of Rachel's murder, they completely debunked his alibi. He was sentenced to a life in prison for Rachel's murder.
Breaking news out of Nevada. A teenager was captured on video escaping out of their home after being held in captivity for a year. On November 4th, officers were called to a home in Las Vegas about a teenager that was using a ladder to climb back up into an upstairs bedroom. Neighbors told police that the girl had actually tied together sheets to come out the window the first time, and once she was down, she asked if she could have some food and water and said that she had been kept inside of a room for over a year and she could only eat whenever her mother would return home from work. The neighbor then asked if there was anything else that she could do, and the girl asked if she could use her ladder to get back up to her room. Before climbing back up, she was seen drinking water out of a water hose. Upon arrival of the home, the mother, Addie Gonzalez, told police that she would go check on her daughter and she didn't want to let the police in the home. Once inside, they realized that the room that the 18-year-old girl is being held captive in has no doorknob and there's only a deadbolt that requires a key. Inside, he saw a box spring and a bed frame. There was also a black bucket that was half a urine and fecal matter. Authorities arrested the 3 individuals on the screen, Addie being the mother and Maria being a grandmother. They are facing child abuse and false imprisonment charges. It has now come to the light that Child Protective Services received 8 previous reports of allegations of abuse and neglect in the home. However, the agency deemed the reports unsubstantiated, citing that there was a lack of cooperation or evidence. That is just terrible.
This is Peter Scully, one of the worst pedophiles in world history. I'm about to tell you his story, but seriously guys, this one is incredibly disturbing. It's so dark, and viewer discretion is really advised for this video. So Peter Scully, he's still alive. He was from Australia, he had a family there, but he was engaging in criminal activities and he eventually fled the country and moved to the Philippines. And this is where the darkness really began. While he was in Australia, Peter Scully started up an international child sex abuse ring. The things that were done to these kids are, I can't even talk about them here on TikTok, but he also started up a pay-per-view video service. And with these videos, he was producing CP, but one of the most extreme forms of CP that can possibly be produced. So how did all this happen? Well, when he was out living in the Philippines, Peter Scully had 2 Filipina girlfriends. They would go out to the streets, they would find kids that needed money or looked impoverished, they would bring them back to the house they shared with Peter, and the things that went on afterwards are literally unspeakable. Remember, like I mentioned before, Peter was the head of an international ring of people that enjoyed the abuse of kids, and he provided videos for these clients. But his most infamous video was titled Daisy's Destruction. This video that he produced was so extreme, so hardcore that people on the internet, when they heard about what happened in the video, literally thought that it was an urban legend and they thought that there was no way this could be real. This is an actual screenshot of the beginning of the video. This is a screenshot from the very beginning of the video. In the video, 3 young girls are repeatedly tortured for hours and hours on end by Peter Scully and his 2 girlfriends from the Philippines. They are beaten, they are sexually abused. I mean, I can't even describe, like I said on TikTok, some of the things that happened in this video. And 18-month-old Daisy. Now keep in mind that all of this was on camera. That's the most disturbing part of this. One of Peter's victims actually ended up dying. They were buried in his house. And this sick individual literally sold that video footage across the world. And what's even more disturbing is that there were lots of people willing to pay to see that video. I'm not kidding. People were paying $10,000 to view this video. That is absolute insanity that there are people that sick out there in the world. And this is only the beginning of the crimes that this guy carried out. Some of the other stuff that we're going to touch on is absolutely disgusting. It's just horrific. And the story of how Peter Scully was eventually identified and arrested is extremely captivating. I'm going to run out of time here on this video, but if you want to see a part 2, let me know below. The story is far from over. This is Peter Scully, one of the worst pedophiles in world history. Peter Scully became infamous across the planet for producing a video called Daisy's Destruction. A video so apparently hardcore that people couldn't believe it was real. They thought it was an urban legend. This story is really disturbing, so please do not watch this if you have a sick stomach. This is a screenshot from the video. This is also a screenshot from the video. I mean, look at the text on the screen of the video before it would start. And keep in mind, the girl that they're talking about, Daisy, was an 18-month-old child. In the video, Peter Scully and his 2 accomplices tortured 3 young girls, including Daisy, for hours and hours on end. And people across the planet were purchasing this video for $10,000. I mean, this is truly one of the most horrific things I've ever read about or researched, and it's so sad that people are like this out there. And this story only gets worse. Peter Scully actually recorded a video of him sexually assaulting, torturing, and then forcing a young girl to dig her own grave before he strangled her to death with a rope. And people across the planet were purchasing this footage for their own pleasure. It's absolutely just sickening. But you can't get away with this stuff forever. So eventually word got out about Daisy's destruction. Various law enforcement agencies across the planet were on the hunt for Peter Scully, but they couldn't track him down. So eventually the investigators headed to the Philippines to try and locate the victims that were in the video. Sadly, the investigators were able to locate 2 of the young girls, including Daisy. They had lasting permanent injuries, but they were still alive. But Cindy, the other girl in Daisy's destruction, was found to be dead and buried in Peter Scully's apartment. But finding all this out led them directly to Peter Scully. Here's a picture of him being arrested finally. And they were also led to his 2 accomplices. This is one of them, and this is a screenshot of an outfit she was wearing in one of the videos. It's just horrific. When he was brought to trial, Peter Scully faced 75 different counts of abuse against children. And investigators who were forced to watch that video footage came back traumatized. There are actual news reports discussing how judges and investigators were actually left just needing mental health help because of what they saw in that video. Now, there's a lot more to the story about how Peter Scully was actually captured and the techniques that investigators had to use, but I can talk about that in a part 3 if you'd like. Now, Scully was handed a life sentence eventually in the Philippines where he's currently imprisoned. But this story isn't over. This is just a crazy twist. So, in October of 2015, a fire ravaged the evidence room in the police department of the area where Peter Scully was, being held. And almost all of the evidence against him was lost in this fire. So people think that he may have bribed a police officer because the area was rife with corruption at that time. But regardless, he does have a life sentence. He's going to be in prison in the Philippines for life. And just this month, he was actually handed down another 129 years in prison. But it still can't take back all the horrific things that he did in his life. This is just such a sad and disturbing story. This man truly is evil.